Thanks for checking it out. In just a minute, someone is going to give a short talk that hopefully resonates with you and helps you interpret what it might mean to follow in the way of Jesus, because that's what this community is all about. Figuring out what it might look like to live life the way that Jesus did, except in our current context with like cell phones and self-driving cars and stuff. We're a community where everyone is invited, included, and involved no matter what. And though our physical location is in the budding metropolis of the Tri-Cities, wherever you're watching this from, we want to invite you to bring a bit of heaven into your part of the world. Thanks for catching us on the interwebs. If you're looking for more content, follow us on social media or keep checking our website for all kinds of resources that we hope are helpful. And now, this.
You really like it? What's going on here? I gotta go check the receipts on where she's been shopping lately. So, anyways, we are glad that you are here. Good morning and welcome. For those of you watching online or on replay, because it's smoky out or whatever else, we're so glad that you are tuning in. However it is that you are doing this, we are on part 3 of a series we're calling OMG. It's a series on idolatry. And we had to call it OMG because a series on idolatry doesn't resonate. It's not sexy enough. Like nobody thinks that I struggle or we struggle with idolatry. It's not like, you don't have anything hidden in your basement, these idols that you're like, he found out, he knew. I don't know how he knew, but he got me. So we have to talk about it in a kind of a different way. It is week 3 of a series, so you're coming in partway through. If you're a guest with us, we're glad that you're here. You have a couple of options to catch up. We have an app that you can download and get those things on demand, or you can go to eastlakecitycities.com/talks and get them anytime you want. But what we've been saying is essentially this, that there's a great book by a guy named Charles Taylor who talks about how we're entering into a secular age. And in our secular age, one of the characteristics that has kind of been, that kind of defines this for us, has been 500 years ago, you wouldn't even think about having a person operate without a sense of the divine, right? That was just so common across all kinds of international boundaries. Everybody sort of lived with this sense of accountability towards a divine creator. I don't know what it is, and we might call it different things, but there was a way in which everything kind of centered around this. You worship this, you did this. And yet here we are 500 years later, and not only is it possible to kind of live in that way, it's very, very plausible to be able to live in a society that's like, God, as Nietzsche would say, is dead, and we don't need that sort of thing for transcendence, fulfillment, or what it means to be a person anymore. We can get into sports, or we can get into other things. Other things have taken its place, and that's been the problem. Really, is that I read this week some guy who wrote this: secularization has not replaced our gods with the ideas, knowledge, or convictions that might have their place. It's left us with the spiritual void that human beings fill as best that they can, sometimes with grotesque substitutes. In other words, we all crave transcendence, meaning, purpose in life. When you take out God from the picture, it's amazing how creative we are at coming up with other things that fill this void and challenge us in this way. Something must capture our imaginations, our heart's most fundamental allegiance and hope. And we are all on a quest to figure out what that is. And we do it a lot of different ways based on personality, based on where we grew up, based on our income, whatever. Last week we realized that a lot of times our culture has replaced the idea of a divine, or the idea of God, or the idea of this is really what makes life most meaningful. Because that's really the question of it. Everything's kind of doldrums, everything's kind of get through life, and we're making money, we're raising kids, we're doing this. But then what is the thing that's like what is most important when you say this is what's most important? And in our culture, apocalyptic romance is what we said last week, is a big piece of it. It's sex, it's relationships, it's marriage, it's a love story transcends all things. A love story makes a movie plot what it is. When we see this movie plot with other things, we're like, yeah, but there's like nothing that I don't believe anybody would do this or act in this way or respond in this way. And then they say, well, what if it was for love? What if it was about somebody? What if they would go and they would sacrifice this and take on this adventure for the cause of love? And we would say, okay, that's a little bit more plausible. That's a little bit more realistic. We have transcended what are people doing? Why would they make decisions in unique ways and think through a lens of this is what's most important, if not for love? Love, romance has been the thing for a long time that has been kind of what we said, the transcendent thing that exists in our culture. And we said that love's a good thing. Love's great. I want you to have happy marriages. I want you to appreciate sex as God created it to be, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's really important. But the problem that we have a lot of times is that in any time we take something that's good and we make it most ultimate, we kind of ruin it, right? anytime that we take something that's good and we make it the most important thing, that if it's taken out from under us will cause us not only sorrow, because you can have sorrow when a marriage falls apart. You can be very, very sorrowful. It should be sorrowful. But you can have what's called also despair, which is inconsolable desperation. I don't know how I'm going to exist beyond this. You take this away from me. I was so invested into this job. I kind of idolized this job. And now that I can't do it anymore, I don't know how I'm going to live. And that's a dangerous spot to be in. For so many people for a long time, this idea was, we'll always have God. God, no matter how our life falls apart, and this maybe your grandpa that you grew up who's super religious, right? Bad things happen to him, bad things happen to your grandma or whatever. And they always kind of like, yeah, but you know what? I still have my God, or what? I still have Jesus or something. You're like, oh man, that's great. And we go through life now, and a lot of times we've made good things, ultimate things, we lose them. They break up with us. They tell us they don't want to be married anymore. The job falls apart. The things get cut, budgets get cut. Everything goes away. And we fall into not sorrow, but it's a greater sense than that, despair. And we experience despair. And that is a great sign that we've made an idol of something. However, in that moment, it's almost too late. Like, we're already experienced despair. That sucks. I don't want you to experience that. I want you to get at early. I want you and I to begin to evaluate, what are good things that I've made an ultimate thing that if it went away, I don't even know what I would do with myself. And is that an unhealthy spot to be in? And it's really obvious sometimes in a lot of the lives of other people. You've seen people in your life who have hobbies, who's great. Everybody should have hobbies. You got to find and spend your time and money on something, right? And yet they've made that hobby into something that is ultimate, and it's gone out of bounds, and it's demanded boundaries that are different than what's kind of appropriate. And then we say that I think that you've taken that hobby and I think you've made it too much, man. I think your family is feeling the result and the pinch of getting in the way of your hobby. I think that your family life, your marriage is kind of suffering because you've taken something out of its appropriate boundaries and into something different, right? And that's not a good spot to be in. So anyways, that's what this whole series has been about. We're going to be evaluating some of the common ones, some of the big ones, and seeing what we can do to identify these. And we said early on, the essence of the struggle is over what we worship, not necessarily what we believe. It's what we worship, not what we believe. It has to do with our actions, our rituals, the way that we do life, not a collection of our thoughts. Nobody believes they have idols. Nobody thinks, I'm gonna make sex and relationships into improper boundaries, or I'm messed up in this area. We just think we're operating. This is how we live our life. So it has to do with behavior, not necessarily an organization of thoughts. And we set a great filter for us to begin to ask the question: How do we begin to identify idols in our lives? Is what do we love? What do we trust? And who do we obey? What do we love? What do we trust? And who do we obey? What do we love? What do we obsess over? What in our free time does our mind race to? What is it that we can't get enough of? It's just like this insatiable quest for more. What do we love? What do we trust? What brings us a level of security? What makes us feel safe? What makes us feel like this is good? That I'm secure in who I am as a person. I am secure with putting this identity out on social media as everybody can see this is what I like and this is who I am. And then who do I obey? What is it in my life that when it says this, I say, okay, no matter what the cost, I'm just going to go and do this. And yes, it can be sex, love, and relationships, but it can also be other things. And today we're going to be talking about how it's money. Now, I had to couch that up with all of this because nobody likes to talk about money. And I knew if we'd said this, I can't even do series on money very often because just people stop showing up. They're like, we'll get the next one. You know what I mean? So I've got to figure out creative ways to do it. So then I talk about how it's OMG and idols, and then I say, by the way, we're going to be talking about money because Jesus talked about money, and this is kind of an important thing, and I think it's very much an idol. And it's not just the religious idol. Listen to what Nietzsche has to say. This is a philosopher, atheist, right? This is will to power. This is the guy who influenced like Nazism, which like take that for, that doesn't mean that what he isn't said isn't worthy, because there was a mindset that went behind this that kind of informed this, right? This is what are they talking about? This will to power. This like. And he's obsessed with power, by the way, but he has fantastic thoughts on money as it relates to culture. This is back in the 40s or whatever, but still highly relevant for today. Listen to this. What was once done for the love of God is now done for the love of money. For the love of that which at present affords us the highest feeling of power. Again, he's obsessed with this. But what induces one man to use false weights, another to set his house on fire after having insured it for more than its value, while 3/4 of our upper class indulge in legalized fraud. What gives rise to all this? What causes all this? It's not real want for their existence is by no means precarious. In other words, people act ridiculous. They already have that. That's covered. We're good. It's definitely something more than that. But they are urged on day and night by a terrible impatience at seeing their wealth pile up so slowly. Oh my gosh, isn't that true? Isn't that it? Have you ever pulled out your phone, opened up whatever app it is that you use to control your bank account, savings account, retirement account, IRAs, Roth IRAs, or whatever, and you're going, gosh, I wish that would grow faster. What in the world's going on with this? And what we do is we see these articles come through in email, your savings, you're retiring by the age 35, and you're like, I'm 35. And it's like, they know that. That's why they sent this to you, right? And you're like, I better click on this link and evaluate where I'm at. And I'm looking at all this thing, and I'm all these different spots. I'm evaluating myself based on somebody else's things, and I'm just going, mine's not growing as fast as everybody else's. And even in the last year when the stock market went nuts, right, with all this infusion of fake money or whatever, and it's like you throw a dart and pick a good stock, you're like, yeah, but it could have gone faster. There's all these people who, when I look at the fastest growing stock of the day, not what I had. Anyways, all this kind of obsession with piling up so slowly, and by an equally terrible longing and love for these heaps of gold. What once was done for the love of God is now done for the love of money, for the love of that which at present affords us the highest feeling of power and a good conscience. It used to be what gave us a feeling of power and a good conscience, this idea of being in right standing with God. And now he's saying that has faded, and here's what it is now. Heaps of gold. Piles of gold, bank accounts with lots of zeros in them. That is what tells us I'm powerful and I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. What is it that answers the question, am I doing all right for you? What is it that drives us to be like, how do I know that I'm doing all right? I'm stressed out about this. I'm doing the social media thing. I'm watching this thing. I'm evaluating. I'm constantly going, am I doing all right? Am I doing good? I need this. I need this from my spouse. I need this from my significant other. I need to know, am I doing all right? Am I doing all right? And one of the main ways that we value or measure that is with the sense of money, the security of wealth, because that speaks volumes about how we're doing in this way. It comes down to, what do we love? What do we trust? And who do we obey? Now, you would never say that money is an idol for you, because nobody ever says that. I don't say that. I've never had somebody come up to me after service and be like, hey, as you were talking, I realized, like, my problem is that I'm greedy. Nobody ever says that, ever, right? A lot of other things, for a lot of different things, nobody says greed, because greed is difficult, incredibly difficult to spot in the mirror for a couple of reasons. One, we tend to relativize wealth. We tend to think in ourselves, I'm not rich. I know people who are rich. I know people, and we look at people within our similar tax bracket, similar line of work, and we say, well, they have a pool, they have a this, they have a boat, they have a really nice house, they have multiple cars, they have so many cars. Like, what in the world? Who needs all those cars? We look at this and we can point to a lot of different things and think, I'm not rich. I know if you're looking for people who are rich who probably struggle with greed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak bad about them, but it's pretty easy to spot. I've got some people for you. Let me come up with a list. They're all my neighbors. It's like every neighbor on my street, except for maybe one, right? We relativize it, and we don't think of ourselves. And if we move up a tax bracket, then all we've done is we have a new farm of people to kind of learn from and be like, let me go find other people who are rich for you. And number two, we tend to project as a means of self-defense from beliefs we find difficult to deal with. The things that we often don't like about ourselves, we project onto other people. Do you hear a pastor or a teacher in a way harping on some sort of significant moral sin? There's a good chance like 6 months later it comes out, he's got some baggage. He's like, wow, it's kind of weird. He talked about that a lot, right? That's because he was probably struggling with it, or she was probably struggling with it. This is what we do. We tend to look at other people and be like, I'm mad at the greed of everybody else. We read the paper, we read about fraud, we read about stuff, we read about how these millionaires wanted to become multimillionaires, and so they did this whole thing, and all kinds. And we look at that and be like, how in the world could they? And that makes us so mad. And when we talk about it, and there's definitely a sense of like, the lady doth protest too much sometimes, when we go, maybe perhaps that's a problem for me, and my obsession with other people's greed is because I have a little bit of myself. A great and fantastic starting point, at least from a biblical perspective, when it comes to the area of greed, is we should all begin with a working hypothesis that this could easily be a problem for me. To start off and be like, not really a problem for me, but we should talk about them. I'm glad you're talking about this, Brent. There's a lot of people who need to hear this. In fact, is this recorded? Because I would love to, my husband, my cousin, oh my gosh, my ex, I'm going to just send him a link and be like, hey, church was great this Sunday. You should check it out, right? Real passive-aggressive style. This is the message that gets passed along to other people that we don't often go, what about me, right? But the working hypothesis should be this is always, no matter where I'm at, could be a problem. This could easily be a problem for me, which is why Jesus, when he had a chance to talk to people about money, says this in Luke chapter 12, verse 10, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Watch out, look out. And he does it in this unique way. He takes this unique approach about it. He's not giving them 3 steps to, avoiding greed in your life or 7, attitudes towards money or something like that. Watch out, be careful. Notice, it's interesting that Jesus never says this about some other common things that he's against. He never has a single verse where he says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of adultery. Be careful that you're not committing adultery. Because when you're in bed with somebody else's spouse, it's pretty obvious. You know it. Halfway through, you're not thinking, hey, wait a minute, I think this might be adultery, right? It's very clear what's going on here. The danger with greed, Jesus would say, is you can be in the middle of it and not even realize it. In other arenas, you're going to know. You're still going to do it. It's still going to happen. But at least then you go, I know what I am. In this one, you might not know. And even though that it's clear that the world is filled with greed and materialism, and everybody would say, I think that that's true, almost nobody thinks it's true of them. It's the same type of people who go, how do you think you did on a test? I think I did above average. 95% of people think they did above average. Who's below average? Like, that's what average is all about anyways. That's the attitude with greed. Greed, by the way, last point on this is not only the love of money, but excessive anxiety about it. It has almost nothing to do with quantity and has everything to do about our excessive anxiety about it. How to keep it, how to get more of it, how to grow it faster than we're currently doing it. It has nothing to do with how many zeros are in this. You could have almost nothing and still have anxiety about having nothing, and that's still greed, even though you'd be like, I'm not greedy. I only have X amount of dollars in my account. You have to start with $100,000 or more. That's where you start with greed. No, you start with excessive anxiety about it because Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard for all kinds of greed, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. His life, there's going to be a natural inclination to equate your sense of self-worth with your sense of how much stuff you have. And watch out. And Jesus talks about this kind of thing so much. He talks about money, not because he wanted the people's money. He's talking to, by the way, a group of people who almost have no money. The ultimate hand-to-mouth society in a foreign-occupied land, right, who most of their money is going to Rome anyways. They have nothing, and he keeps talking about them going, you're going to have a problem with money, watch out. It's crazy for us to look at them and be like, you would think that's not real fertile soil for greed, and yet Jesus seemed to think that it was because he talked about it so much. In fact, if I were to preach in the same ratio about money that Jesus talked about ratio in the New Testament, you wouldn't go to this church anymore. You would say, I stopped going to Eastlake. Brent kept obsessively talking about money, and I hated it. In fact, you talk to most people when we do surveys of what's your, especially for people who are like not in a church, which is our target audience, what's the first thing that comes to your mind about church? They obsessively talk about money. It might be because they're like, well, we're just going through the book of Mark. You know what I mean? And Jesus talks about it over and over again. I have to be kind of strategic about it. I have to kind of move in other ways so that we can avoid some of that stuff. But Jesus lays out the reason our emotions are so powerfully controlled by our bank account. It's because it's a reminder, our life does not consist in the abundance of our possessions, or it doesn't consist in what we own or consume. Personal wealth is oftentimes wrapped up in material wealth. And if they lose their sense of wealth, they lose their sense of self almost. And when they do that, money, we know this to be true, money makes people do weird things. Here's a story that he highlights for us about a guy struggling with this sense of greed, who did have a lot to be greedy about. but it's an interesting story for us. It's in chapter 19 of Luke's gospel. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, New Testament gospel. Here's the story and life of the person of teaching of Jesus. Luke was probably a doctor who kind of collected these stories and wrote them down, probably for a friend who there was a lot of information out there. There's a lot of disinformation. Let me help you with what's accurate about this person who I heard and saw and knew as Jesus. It's a story about a guy named Zacchaeus, and there's a song that goes with it. We're not going to sing it today, but you maybe grew up singing it if you went to church. And if you didn't, find somebody in the lobby who did and have them sing it for you in the lobby. That'll be great. That'll be fun, entertaining. Verse 1 says this: Jesus entered Jericho and is passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Those two things went together all the time. If you were a tax collector, you were wealthy. There were no poor tax collectors. That's not how it worked. The reason you became a tax collector is so that you could get rich. It was the only reason that you went and did a tax collector. Otherwise, you'd do something else. If money was not a factor in this, nobody became a tax collector because tax collectors are not popular. That's true today, right? I've never met an IRS agent. At least I think I haven't. They've never led with that information, wisely so. Have you ever been to a party and goes, "Hi, my name's Carl, I'm an IRS agent"? You'd be like, "Get out of here, Carl. We don't like you. What are you doing here?" Nobody likes Carl. We don't like that. Sorry if your name's Carl. I like you. Just as long as you're not an IRS agent. They have to be creative. They have to come up with other things. Oh, I work for the government. I'm in finance. That's a good one. I'm in finance. Oh, you're in finance? What bank or lender? Yeah, the U.S. Bank. All this kind of whatever. It's funny how we have to get creative in this way. Tax collectors in this context are traders to their own people. They're collaborators with the Romans. The Romans are like, listen, we want to gather taxes from these people. We don't want to overburden them, but we want them to pay their fair share. And by their fair share, we mean we want a lot of this money to go to Rome for the protection that they need from our armies who are in their area. And because there's no W-2 forms, there's an unknown about who was really wealthy, who had the money, who didn't. So instead of a blanket tax across everybody, they rightfully wanted to be like, well, if you have more, you get taxed more. If you have less, you get taxed less. But since we don't know who those people are, we need to hire insiders. We are going to hire people who are from there, who are well connected in the community, who know what people have and what people don't have, to be able to go knock on doors and be like, listen, Kevin, I know you have a farm. I know you make a lot of money. There's going to be some money involved in this. And then they get a portion of the money that goes back. So whatever they collect, they get a portion of it. They send their portion back to Rome, and they get to keep their own, and they get to be wealthy. It is a lucrative but lonely position, a lot like being a pastor, really, in that sense. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. Lucrative, lonely position. Jericho is a major customs center, lots of traffic. Anytime there's lots of traffic, that means more money. More people, more revenue, more traffic, very rich. He was a chief tax collector. The technical term is architectonos there, which basically means if this is a pyramid scheme, he's the one on the top making all the money. You know how those things work? The people on the bottom, they're like doing all right, but not great, and they're trying to make it seem like they're doing good. But the people who are really doing good are the people up here. He was one of the people up there in this scene making lots of money. And as it goes, the correlation between those who make more and the level of hatred from the outsiders towards those people, there was a direct correlation. The more you made, the more we don't like you. Very American, very, very true in this way. So he moves on. Sorry. You're supposed to laugh at that part. I thought that was a funny one. Verse 3, he wanted to see who Jesus was. This is Zacchaeus. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. There's a crowd of people. He's short. Luke makes mention of this specifically. Now, in this scenario, he could have been taking a pot shot at his size or little man syndrome or whatever. Or I think more likely what he's trying to say is there's a crowd there and he's short, so naturally he would want to kind of like weave in through the crowd towards the front to be able to see. But when you're a Zacchaeus and you're a tax collector and you're super wealthy as a result of all these people, who's not going to let you through? Like these people, right? There's a crowd, and that's unfortunate. He doesn't like crowds because crowds don't like him. What are you doing here, Zacchaeus? You're too short? That sucks. Sorry. Not getting through. Basically is what's happening, I think, here. So he ran ahead, and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. And I love this story because Luke captures this idea of making sure that it's very clear that Jesus does the initiation for the relationship, not Zacchaeus. We oftentimes think like, I went to church or I went to summer camp one day, and then I invited Jesus into my heart. Like I did all of the work for Jesus to come in. He's so thankful that I took those steps. And it's very, very clear in this scenario that Jesus invited Zacchaeus into his life and not the other way around. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be funny later on if Zacchaeus was trying to tell the story. It'd be funny to hear how he told the story to other people years, months later or whatever about that day. So then Jesus walking through, and I was like, hey, Jesus, you busy today? You should come over to my house. And he's like, no. What really happened was Jesus did all the work in inviting us into that, which I think is more true than the flip side for us as well, but whatever. Verse 6, so he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. Jesus is constantly doing this. Dinners with people who weren't supposed to be in the good category. These are not deserving of his time. He should think and know better than this. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Now, there's a way to read this in which Zacchaeus is like, maybe like, this is quick. This happened as a result of even just Jesus saying, I want to be a part of this. And it was such a flipping of the script that Zacchaeus didn't know what to do. I think, though, this comes like hours later, after they've had a chance to kind of dive into this relationship, after he's had a chance to hear Jesus do his kind of spiel about the kingdom of heaven is here and all these kinds of things that I think then Zacchaeus kind of felt prompted to do something. And notice, I think this is so important. Jesus isn't saying demanding of this. If you do this, I'll come to your house. And if you don't, find somebody else to come over for dinner. He's saying, I'm going to your house. And then as a result of that introduction of grace, this is a response to that. Mosaic law, by the way, requires like this 20% interest for cheating somebody. All of a sudden, Zacchaeus says, not 20%. If I've cheated anybody, 4 times the amount, 4 times, 300%. This is, we're going big in all of this thing. It's not a measure. It's not if I've done anything wrong, which communicates something to him too. Like, if he had had a track record of taking advantage of people, this would have been a very dangerous statement. But I think what he's trying to say is, listen, I've been upfront. You may not have liked what I've done, the job thing that I chose, but I tried to do it as fairly as possible. And if by chance something slipped through, I will make it right. And lucky are those who I have cheated. Lucky will be those who I have cheated. In other words, I didn't get here from just theft and robbery. I know it was involved in taking this job. What is the one thing that could cause somebody to disavow their family, their nation of heritage, and live as a pariah in the midst of all of those people? There's only one answer to that, and that's money. And he's like, I know what I did. I'm not a cheat. I'm not a thief. But I understand that I idolized money in this way. So don't call me a cheat or a thief, but I totally understand. I took something that was good. I made it an ultimate. I listened and I obeyed something other than what I should. I trusted in something that I shouldn't have. I loved something that I shouldn't have. I made money into an idol. It became a form of greed for me. I see that and I want to do something about this. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is the son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Now this word salvation right here, I put in parentheses deliverance here because salvation oftentimes we think of in terms of like unsaved, saved, like came, raised a hand, said a prayer, got baptized, something like that. And it's like you went from this to this. But this word here really means more deliverance. And I think in general usage, this is a better term anyways too. But today, deliverance, this guy has been delivered from this obsession with stuff. This has come. Notice he didn't say, if you live like this, salvation will come, or I promise if you do this and can prove that you've done it and submit receipts for this, then I'm going to give you passage into heaven when you die. That's not what this is going. That's not the point of the talk. What he's trying to say is this shows me, or this is a pattern, or this is the initiation of a new way of doing life, a deliverance of doing something else, of getting away from that sort of life and into something different. It has come. And I love this for another reason. This is not Jesus demanding that he do this. This is simply Jesus offering an observation about this. Zacchaeus was so drawn in by the grace of Jesus and by the way of doing things, and in his presence, realizing my shortcoming in the area of greed, that I'm choosing to do something in response to this. Not because Jesus demanded it from him, or else I'm leaving this house if you don't do this. I want this I don't want something from you. Jesus isn't like, give me the money. I'll bear the burden of this, which is oftentimes like our fear of churches a lot of times. Like if you grew up not really a church person and your issue with money in the church is that it feels like pastors like me get up on stage and be like, money's terrible, isn't it? It's like it does damage to your souls. Here, give it to me. I'll take on that burden for you and we'll be good, right? And as you walk out, there's going to be some deliverance boxes at the top of the ramp and we'll just give to these things. And you're like, this is not what Jesus is doing here, right? He's simply saying, I'm making an observation. What you do with this, I don't care. But what I want for you is deliverance from the obsessive anxiety of more. Like, who are you worshiping in this way? Paul would take up that exact same mantle. He would have a church in Corinth that he had started in this area, and he left and would write correspondence back and forth. A couple of those letters were captured for us, 1st and 2nd Corinthians in your New Testament. They call them the pastoral epistles, or these writings. And Paul wants this church to take up an offering for the poor, not even for himself, but there's poor people in Jerusalem who are struggling through the persecution of the area that they live in. You live in Corinth, you've got tons of money. What you have in excess, they have almost nothing of. Would you consider out of your generosity doing something for these people? Now, I could command you to do this. I could say, listen, if you want me to continue on as an external elder, if you want me to write you letters, if you want me to come visit you, if you want to be really a church, you're going to do this. I would rather just have you do this out of your grace and out of a response to what you've seen. And just taking an evaluation of your inventory of your life. Here's what he writes. For you know the grace in chapter 8, verse 9, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. He points not to the moral obligation for this. He doesn't give them pictures of like these emaciated children in Jerusalem who need your money or else they're going to die. What he shows them is you have been blessed with so much. You have a God who gave, who is generous with you. Therefore, it would make sense in your response to be generous with yourself and with your stuff. And by the way, don't get caught up in the idol of money, in the idol of greed. Jesus gave up all of his treasure in heaven in order to make you his treasure, for you are a treasured people. When you see him dying to make you his treasure, that will make him your treasure. Money will cease to be the currency of your significance and your security, and you will want to bless others with what you have. That is the pastoral calling that Paul is working with, and that is the goal. When we're going to talk about money as a church, my goal for you is honestly, it's this: how do we break this obsession with our culture and greed and money? I don't want something from you. I want something for you. Deliverance from this idol that seeks to provide for you. Security. It seeks to answer a few questions for you. What do you love? What do you obsess over? What do you trust? What makes you feel good? What makes you feel like I'm doing all right? And who do you obey? How many times in your life have you said, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't take this job because it's going to hurt my family life. My wife doesn't want me to take it, but doggone it, the money's good. So I'm going to do, I know it's not healthiest for me. I know it puts me in precarious positions and there's way too much travel and it's not good for me and my kids at home in the season of life. But how do I not do this because of the money? And that becomes the filter by which we look through things. And Jesus would say, I want you delivered from that. I don't want you to live life that way. That is a terrible way to do life. You've made a good thing into an ultimate thing. And when it's gone, you'll despair and be like, oh, I just replay how many times I should have taken that job or should have done this or blah, 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 blah. And you miss out on the life that Jesus is inviting you to. Maybe we could be the type of people that Jesus would say, today, deliverance has come to this home, to this household, to this people, to this person. That they look and they go, I have been given so much. God has been so generous with me. It just makes sense for me to be generous with others. All right. That is part 3 of this. Let's pray and then we'll move on. Father, thank you for this story, this insight, this picture, this person, Zacchaeus, who by all accounts was probably better off than us in this culture and what they were in relation to who he was at, and you guided him, and we get a first-hand account of this story of him waking up to the realization that it's not, that life's more than just money, and and then we get to see this deliverance piece in this conversation you have with him. I pray that as we would be able to go through this week, and as we experience stuff, decisions, things that we filter in, and let us take an account, an awareness of how much we allow the money thing to filter into the decision-making process of our life this week. As we begin to evaluate, have I made this good thing into something that's ultimate? Is this what I obey? Is this what I trust? Is this what I obsess over? Is this what I love? Give us the wisdom to know what it might look like this week, and the courage to do something about it. In your name, amen. All right. Inside of the program that was on a table right outside the door as you walked in, hopefully you grabbed one of these, is a Connect card. It looks just like this. If you didn't grab one on your way in, you can grab one on your way out for sure. On the front side of the spot for some personal information, this is your chance to let us know who's here. We ask everyone to fill these out, whether you're a guest or not. But if you are a guest, there's a spot on the lower left-hand side that says first or second-time guest. We do a thing where we donate money to a different organization outside of the walls of this church who are doing good things in our community or around the world. And for the month of August, it's Second Harvest Tri-Cities, which is a local food distribution center where excess from farms get delivered to here. They sort it out, they clean it, they do all kinds of stuff. They get it out to food banks, invite to go packages for kids at school. They just make sure that this food gets in the hands of the right people who need it. So they're doing amazing work. If you're interested in volunteering with some of them, they do food sorts. Me and my wife have participated in that. It's easy for kids as well. You can go on our website, go to the Where Love page, click on Second Harvest, get on their mailing list, and sign up for volunteer opportunities. Or just get in touch with one of us, and we'll put you in the right direction. On the back side, a spot for some next steps, and then a spot on the bottom for prayer requests or life updates or whatever else that you would like to let us know. There's a giving envelope at East Lakes Home for you. This is your chance to help us out financially to continue to give and make this place possible for people who don't typically like church. You can drop all of these things in the deliverance boxes at the top of the ramp. Zacchaeus will be standing right by those to make sure they get in there. It'll be great. Only announcement that I really have, we are changing our service times a little bit. This service doesn't change. It will be at 10 o'clock throughout the fall. But our early service, if you kind of bounce back and forth between them, instead of 9 o'clock, we've been doing 9 and 10. It's going to start at 8:30, starting September 5th. So September 5th, 8:30 and 10 o'clock moving forward to allow us a little bit more time in between services and just a couple of different things. We also have our final back alley night of the year is coming up this on August 27th. So it's not this upcoming Friday, but I think the Friday after that. So a live concert out in the alley. Not Foghat. It'll be great. You don't want to do that. It'll be much better than that. So come check that out. And then last but not least, I don't have a slide for this, but we as a board sat down recently and we're evaluating kind of going into the fall what we want to do. We're trying to do this mailer. We're trying to change these service times up and reintroduce even like an early childhood thing at the first service and really trying to make sure that we're ready for fall, ready to welcome guests. We've been in kind of a weird season, as you all have for the last 18 months. And we know that there have been people who are here in East Lakes Home, and you watch and you show up and participate or whatever. And we want to do some sort of a vision night on Sunday, August 29th. So it's a Sunday evening. It'll be at 7 o'clock. It'll be an hour. We're going to have one big long table here. We'll have dessert and wine and water, and we'll turn some of the water into wine. It's going to be a great night. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to be a fantastic night for kind of us to kind of be like, here's what we want to do. But we want to make sure this is what you all kind of want to do. And we're going to need your help to kind of get there. We don't have a big enough staff to do this. We need volunteers. We need people with vision. We need people with a desire to kind of make this place a place for your friends who aren't currently going. If they're going to church somewhere and they love it, like not them. What about the friends who are not going anywhere and don't have anything, don't have a place that they feel like they can belong. So we want to be that place for them. Help us create that, both by insights into what you think it could look like and then also making those things known. So mark your calendars for that night. It's going to be a big night. Would love to have you out for that evening. We'll have a youth event offsite going on that night, a back-to-school bash at the Plemons, and then we'll have something going on for kids in the other theater. So we got your kids covered. We just want you here that night. Free event, come August 29th. Sunday night. More information in the weekly later this week. Would you stand for closing benediction? I'll get you out of here. Here's what it says. Give us the courage to follow the way of your cross and to trust that though it confounds the logic of the world, your way interrupts the patterns of sin and death both now and forever. Amen. May that go with you this week. Whatever it is you're facing next week, we'll be back with part 4 of OMG. If we've never met, I'll be in the lobby. We'd love to say hello and put a name to a face. We've also got some snow cones out there for your kids. So make sure to go pick them up. Don't forget them in the kids' rooms. And have a great week. We'll see you next week, part 4.